You're scrolling through Facebook on a Sunday evening, and there it is. A photo. Your son, laughing, at the dinner table. Your sister's dining room. You recognize the curtains. You look at the caption. Great weekend with the family. You put the phone down, because the last time he came to see you was 4 months ago. You've called twice since then. He answered once. And your sister's house? 3rd time this year. If that scenario felt familiar, if something in your chest just tightened a little, I want you to stay with me for the next few minutes. Because I've sat across from hundreds of parents over the past 4 decades who have carried this exact pain. Quietly, privately. Often too ashamed to say it out loud, because saying it means admitting you're comparing yourself to your own sibling. And I want to tell you something important right at the start. This is not about love. Your children love you. But love and visiting are 2 different things. And the gap between them, that's what we need to talk about today. I've been a clinical psychologist for over 40 years, and I specialize in family relationships in the second half of life. Today, I want to share with you 3 reasons, backed by real psychological research and real family stories, why your adult children may be choosing someone else's home over yours, and not one of them is about the drive. Before we get into the 3 reasons, I want to name what this experience actually is. When you discover that your children are spending more time with your sibling, your brother, your sister, a cousin, than with you, there's a very specific kind of grief that sets in. I call it comparison grief. It's not the grief of loss exactly. Your children are still alive. The relationship is still there, technically. But you're grieving something that's harder to name, the closeness you expected to have by now, the visits you imagined, the version of your family life that didn't come to be. And comparison grief is uniquely painful because it comes with a built-in question that you can't stop asking. What does she have that I don't? And the brain, being the brain, starts filling in answers, most of them wrong. So today, I want to give you the right answers. Not comfortable ones, truthful ones. Because in my experience, the truth, even when it's hard, is always more useful than a comfortable story that keeps you stuck. Here are the 3 real reasons. Reason number 1. Your home has a different emotional climate than your siblings, and your children feel it the moment they pull into the driveway. Let me explain what I mean by emotional climate. Every home has one. It's the invisible atmosphere of a place, the unspoken expectations, the tension that's always been in the walls, the history that nobody mentions but everybody feels. You can't see it, but you feel it within minutes of walking through the door. And here's what 4 decades of family therapy have taught me. Adult children are exquisitely sensitive to the emotional climate of their parents' home. Not because they're weak, because that home is where they learned, as children, what feelings were safe and what feelings were dangerous. That learning doesn't go away. It's in the nervous system. Now think about your sibling's home. Your children walk in there, and there's no history. There's no unfinished conversation from 1987. There's no tone of voice that reminds them of being 10 years old and doing something wrong. There's no subtle pressure to be a certain way. Your sibling is essentially neutral territory, and neutral territory feels like relief. This doesn't mean your home is a bad place. It means it's a loaded place, loaded with meaning, loaded with memory, loaded with relationship, and relationship, by definition, carries weight. I want to introduce you to a term I use with my clients: emotional overhead. Emotional overhead is the invisible cost of showing up somewhere. It's all the mental and emotional energy you spend before you even arrive, anticipating certain conversations, preparing for certain reactions, preloading certain defenses. When the emotional overhead of visiting a place is high enough, people start finding reasons not to go. They don't do this consciously. They don't sit down and think, Mom's house has high emotional overhead, so I'll go to Aunt Carol's instead. They just notice that they feel lighter at one place than the other. And over time, they drift toward the lighter feeling. I worked with a woman, I'll call her Margaret, who came to see me at 68. She was devastated that her son hadn't called in 3 weeks, but had just helped her sister move apartments. She couldn't understand it. As we talked, a pattern emerged. Every phone call between Margaret and her son ended with her offering advice. Not because she meant harm, because she loved him, because she wanted to help. But from her son's perspective, every call ended with the message, "You're not quite getting it right." And over time, that message, delivered with love, delivered with the best intentions, made the emotional overhead of calling his mother very, very high. Here's the question I want you to sit with after you finish watching this video. When your children leave your home or get off the phone with you, do they feel lighter or do they feel heavier? Not lighter because you were permissive or agreed with everything they said. Lighter because they felt genuinely seen, without an agenda attached. That's the first reason. The climate. Reason number 2, at your sibling's house, your children get to just be. At yours, they feel they have to perform. This one is harder to hear. But it's also, in my experience, the most transformative when people truly understand it. Here's what happens in every family, without exception. Children are assigned roles. Not officially. Not in a meeting where everyone sits down and decides. But over years and years of small moments, a comment here, a comparison there, a pattern of which behaviors got praised and which got corrected, every child in every family develops a role. The responsible one. The difficult one. The one we worry about. The one who never quite lived up to expectations. The one who's doing well. The one we're proud of. These roles feel like descriptions. They're actually prescriptions. They tell the child, even when that child is now 40 years old, how they are supposed to show up. This phenomenon has a name in family systems therapy. It's called role lock. Role lock means that when you step back into the system where the role was assigned, you automatically slip back into playing it. Your body does it before your brain can intervene. Your son walks into your house and, without choosing to, without wanting to, he becomes 17 again. He becomes the kid who was never quite organized enough, or who chose the wrong career, or who didn't call enough. He walks in carrying the invisible costume of whoever he was to you in 1995. At your sister's house, there's no costume. He's just a guy who came for dinner. Nobody there has a 30-year narrative about who he is. Now, and this is crucial, I am not saying this is your fault. This is not about blame. This is about how human psychology works. The role lock is built into the structure of family. It's not unique to you. Every parent triggers some version of this in their adult children. But here's why it matters. The parents who successfully rebuild closeness with their adult children are the ones who actively, consciously work against the role lock. They make a choice, in each interaction, to meet their child as the person they are now, not as the person they were. I had a grandfather, I'll call him William, who came to see me because his 2 adult daughters had both drifted away. He was a good man, retired school teacher, deeply principled, and deeply convinced that his job as a father was to keep his daughters on the right track. Every visit, he asked about their finances, their marriage, whether they were making smart decisions. He thought he was being helpful. What he was actually doing was activating the role lock. You are children who need guidance, and I am the father who provides it. I asked William to try one thing. For 60 days, no advice. No questions about finances. No corrective observations. Just show up and be curious about who they actually are, what they're thinking about, what they're enjoying, what they're afraid of. 6 months later, his older daughter started calling him on Sunday mornings, just to talk. He hadn't changed who he loved. He'd changed the role he was playing. The question for you is, what role do you activate in your children when they walk through your door? And the harder question, is there a different role, father, mother, friend, witness, that you could choose to play instead? Reason number 3, your children may be keeping score, and neither of you knows it. I want to handle this one with particular care because it's the easiest to misunderstand. When I say your children may be keeping score, I don't mean they're sitting around calculating grievances like lawyers preparing a case. Most of them don't even know they're doing it. But the human brain, especially when it comes to early experiences, keeps a ledger. Every child grows up registering moments. Moments when they felt seen, and moments when they didn't. Moments when they felt chosen, and moments when they felt overlooked. Moments of warmth, and moments of absence. These moments get stored not as memories exactly, but as feelings, feelings that get associated with people and places. And here's the uncomfortable part. The ledger is not fair. The brain remembers pain more vividly than joy. A child who was compared unfavorably to a sibling twice may carry that more vividly than 100 moments of genuine love and attention. It's not rational. It's not fair to you. But it's how emotional memory works. I call the gap between what you think you gave and what your child remembers receiving the grievance gap. The grievance gap doesn't mean you were a bad parent. It means you were a human parent, which means imperfect, inconsistent, sometimes present and sometimes distracted, sometimes warm and sometimes stressed. But for your child, certain moments crystallized into a story about the relationship. And that story, even if it's incomplete, even if it doesn't capture all the love you had, is the story they're living inside. Your sibling doesn't have a chapter in that story. That's why the emotional math for your child may make your sibling's house feel like lighter ground, not because of anything your sibling has done, but because of what the ledger says about yours. Now, what do you do with this? The worst thing you can do, and I've watched many well-meaning parents do it, is to try to call a hearing, to sit your child down and go through the ledger item by item, to argue about what really happened in 1992, to explain what you meant, to defend the version of events you carry. That almost never works. And it almost always makes things worse. What does work, slowly, over time, with no guarantee of speed, is creating new entries. Moments where your child feels fully seen, with no agenda. Conversations where you ask questions and then simply listen, without pivoting to your own experience. Visits where they leave feeling lighter, not heavier. You cannot erase what's in the ledger, but you can start filling it with different kinds of entries. And over years, the balance can shift. I want to ask you something, gently, and you don't have to answer out loud. Is there something from the past that you think your child has never fully said, but that you've always felt is there? If the answer is yes, you already know where the ledger is. And that knowledge, uncomfortable as it is the beginning of something. So, what do you actually do with all of this? I've given you 3 hard truths. Now I want to give you 3 practical places to start. Not because these are magic fixes, nothing in human relationships is, but because these are the moves I've seen make a genuine difference. The first move, audit the climate, not your child. The natural response to this kind of pain is to focus on your child. Why aren't they calling? Why do they go to her house instead of mine? What's wrong with them? I want to gently redirect that energy inward, not to blame yourself, but to get curious about what's happening in your home when your child is there. Think back to the last 3 times you and your child spent time together. I want you to notice, how did those interactions end? Not what you talked about, how they ended. Did your child leave looking forward to the next time, or looking forward to being somewhere else? Did the conversation at any point include advice they didn't ask for? Worry delivered as a question? A story from the past that carried a message about the present? I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to be curious. Because once you can see the climate clearly, you can start to change it. The second move, release the role script. This is a practice, not a one-time decision. The next time you're with your child, I want you to try something. Pretend, just for that hour, that you're meeting them for the first time. You're a curious person. You find them interesting. You have no history with them, no story about who they are, no script about what they should be doing. Ask them something you genuinely don't know the answer to. And then, this is the hard part, just listen. Don't redirect to your own experience. Don't offer a solution. Just take in what they're sharing. One phrase I give to parents who are working on this: I don't need to know everything. I just want to be here with you. Say it, mean it, and watch what happens over time. The third move, make the visit about them, not about catching up. Many parents, when they finally do get a visit, treat it like an accounting exercise. There are things to catch up on, information to exchange, ground to cover, and I understand, you've missed them. You want to know everything, but here's what I've observed. Children who feel known keep coming back. Children who feel processed find reasons to stay away. The difference between feeling known and feeling processed is simple. One asks, "Who are you right now?" The other asks, "What have you done lately?" Prepare for the next visit not by making a list of what you want to say, but by making space for what they might want to say. Let there be silence. Let them lead. The goal isn't to have a great conversation. The goal is for them to leave your home feeling like they matter, not like they've checked a box. That's the shift that changes everything. I want to close with something I've been thinking about for a long time. Parents often ask me, how do I get my children to visit more? And I understand the question, but I've come to believe it's slightly the wrong one. The right question, the one that actually leads somewhere, is, what kind of place do I want my home to be for them? Not in a physical sense, not the furniture or the guest room or what you cook for dinner. The feeling of the place, the atmosphere, the role you play when they arrive, the ledger that's been building for decades. Your sibling's house is easy to visit, I suspect, because it's low stakes. There's no history there, no expectations, no unspoken anything. Your home carries all of that. It carries it because it matters, because the relationship is real and deep and complicated and full of love and imperfection and time. But mattering and feeling heavy don't have to be the same thing. You can acknowledge the history without being imprisoned by it. You can love your children fiercely without that love becoming a weight they carry out the door. The door to your home is just wood and hinges. The door they're really deciding whether to walk through, that's the one inside your relationship. And that door? You hold the key. If something in this video resonated with you, if you recognized yourself in any part of what I shared today, I want to encourage you to sit with it, not to rush toward a solution, not to call your son tonight with a new strategy. Just sit with it. Be honest with yourself about what you see. That's where change actually begins. If this conversation was useful to you, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe to the channel. We release new videos every week on the psychology of family life in the second half of life. And hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next one. And if you're navigating something like this right now, if your family situation feels complicated, painful, or just confusing, leave a comment below. I read them. And your story might be exactly what the next video needs to cover. Up next, I'd suggest watching our video on what it really means when an adult child goes silent. The psychology there connects directly to everything we talked about today. Take care of yourself. You deserve that.